Well, hello there. Welcome back to the YouTube channel for the Bitcoin lore. This is the 7th part of a 15-part series that we've tentatively titled Fundamentals of Finance and Bitcoin. In this particular 7th episode, we'll be talking about the high time preference world. The hook is bad money changes human behavior. We'll unpack both the title and the meaning as we do a semi-deep dive into this particular episode. So let's get started. Before we get into this particular 7th episode, let's talk about what is meant by the Bitcoin lore in simple terms. If you haven't already, I welcome you to watch the channel video because that is a very good overview of what the Bitcoin lore is all about. Also, if you're watching this particular episode and have not seen the previous 6, I invite you to binge watch those so you can be up to date. Each episode stands alone, but within the greater context, it's a series of 15 videos. They are meant to give you a cursory overview of how finance works and how Bitcoin works. One is centralized with centralized banks, fiat currencies. The other one is decentralized and disintermediates not only the banks, but all forms of government. Despite the fact that it's true that governments are able to pass laws that regulate cryptocurrencies in general and Bitcoin in particular, nonetheless, Bitcoin at its core, among other privacy tokens, such as Monero, XMR, and more recently Zcash, which are laser beam focused on privacy, Bitcoin is nonetheless a privacy token / coin. These things mean different things to different people. We'll talk about that in future videos. But for all intents and purposes, the governments and the banks are disintermediated, and you take on that responsibility. It's a lot of responsibility, but yet at the same time, it offers a lot of freedom and liberation, so to speak. Now, as we continue to about being halfway through this series, I will be referring to my notes that I took and do extremely more so than before, not just cursory overviews of things like centralized finance and decentralized finance, but go into somewhat of detail here and there in order to expand your horizon and get to know things that you might not have known before. Now, when someone does that, it's worth keeping in mind that there's really 2 approaches. One approach is what most people do, in my experience, which is a grave mistake. They come into a conversation, a field of study, and whatever they already believe and know, these are the meanings that I believe and these are the values that I have, let's just say, for example. And if what their engagement with reading books, having conversations with other people, whatever exposes someone to new information, if anything contradicts what they currently understand in terms of their frameworks of meanings and values, if it corresponds, they agree with it. If it does not correspond, if it's a counterposition to the positions that they have, then they reject it. So they never are truly open-minded to growing in their knowledge, forming their character, and becoming a better person. They're not students of life. They claim to be, but they're really not. The other method, which is the one that I think is better, is these are the meanings and values that a person has. These are the answers to the questions that a person has. And they will be open-minded and look at new information, new insights, new knowledge, new data. And if it's such the case that they need to revise what they previously knew in light of this new information, knowledge, wisdom, data, then they can grow. So that's the method that we here at the Bitcoin Lore endorse, so to speak. As if a person is inside a cave, metaphorically speaking, inside the cave of their mind, that light of asking questions, getting answers, using their imagination to get the correct image in order to get the correct answer to the question they asked, the light of wisdom not only sheds light in front of them, but also in terms of their past experiences, it sheds light in back of them. The high time performance world, or preference world, I should say, and bad money changes human behavior. Let's give a series of examples to really unpack this particular episode and what that title of the high time preference world means. We've talked about in the past to some extent about inflation, which is money losing its purchasing power over time. That's what a person can define inflation as. It's a good working definition. Since that's the case in the fiat world, holding cash becomes irrational and it doesn't make much sense because it's going to lose value over time. So what becomes rational to that irrational behavior of holding on to their fiat currency is spending sooner, borrowing more, and avoiding saving cash. In that scenario, money is not rewarding patience. It's rewarding hard work in the short run, but it's not able to be saved and compounded with interest since its purchasing power is being diluted with the printing of more fiat currency. This leads to a psychological state of a person feeling like, I'm working hard, I'm saving money, but it's pointless. Why is it pointless? Because the cost of living is rising. Housing, education, healthcare, food, all these things going up in terms of cost, and someone who may be retired, who may be in school, unemployed, even if someone is working, what's happening is that their income is not equally, in a typical case, or exceeding through raises and working up the ladder, so to speak, in their respective field, so that the cost of living and inflation is outpacing how much money they're making, and it's not a type of status quo. So saving alone won't work. It just won't. There's a shift that's happening from saving to investing. From the past of decades ago of saving and the safety of it to more of investing and more risk-taking insofar as what can someone invest in to hedge against inflation. So in a sense, people have to become an investor in order to keep up. Consumerism also becomes rational. How does that work? Well, if money, which it is losing its purchasing power over time, inflation, then buying now makes sense because I can rationalize and say, well, I want to buy a laptop, notebook, computer, and if I buy it now, as opposed to 6 months, 1 year from now, it'll cost me less. I can borrow money and buy it now because I know it'll cost more in the future because of inflation. Because tomorrow will be more expensive. Why wait? This is the rationale. However, this is leading to that type of mindset, and taking action leads to buy now, pay later culture. Subscribing to things, borrowing money, having debt, and the accumulation of the interest that's charged on the initial loan can compound. These are individuals with these types of problems, but from a sociological standpoint, the society itself made up of these individuals facing, each person is unique, each circumstance is unique, but there are certain fundamental characteristics that hold true. And so this creates a type of society that becomes short-term focused, not long-term focused. In a fiscal year, Q1, quarter one, all divided up into 3, 6, 9, 12 months. Q1 to Q4, earnings, profits, and losses are focused on. There's election cycles, and things can get delayed, generally speaking, okay? So the culture is, let's say, the American culture and the subcultures within it as a whole, focuses on speed and short term at the detriment of thinking about the long-term consequences, the ripples in the lake of action, such that each major decision, especially when it comes to finance and health, can have either positive or negative consequences down the line that can't be seen if the focus is on short term. So then what's happening is that we're thinking of a big idea in this conversation that we're having. And the big idea is that fiat currency and money in general, let's say in terms of Bitcoin, which is decentralized digital, is the base layer of what they call incentives. This leads to those incentives shaping our behavior. If I think of, again, I want to buy a computer, I can buy it now, I have the money. Because if I buy it 6 months or 1 year later, it's going to cost me more money because of the purchasing power of money going down due to inflation. Even if I don't have money, let's say it costs a certain amount and I only have a quarter of it, I can just put a down payment and pay the rest off in interest, despite the fact that I'll be paying a lot more because I am borrowing money through a loan versus paying everything outright. And so these incentives form the base layer, again, of these habits of individuals and collectively as a society. If it was subcategorized under whatever the yearly income of that individual or family would be. And so these incentives shape a certain type of behavior, and these behaviors cumulatively have consequences on individuals, their families, and then a nation as a whole when studies are being done and things are being measured and tracked. Those behaviors help shape society. If someone changes their mindset and the money that's being used, you would have a different set of incentives, and it would have a different kind of consequential outcome in the world that we live in, such that we are living in the consequences of a centralized finance through central banks, through fiat currency, through fractional reserve lending. Whereas in the last 17 years, Bitcoin, decentralized financing using digital BTC, Bitcoin, as a global nation reserve currency that has deflation and deflationary principles hard-coded into the fixed supply of 21 million Bitcoin. We've actually been talking a lot more in this particular episode and the last one in terms of finance and how centralized financing works and money, fiat currency, than what we have in terms of the inner workings of Bitcoin. But it's really important to understand the way that finance really works and not just some type of theory. We have to also realize, and I'll end on this note, that the point of the Bitcoin lore is to focus on the story of Bitcoin, your own story, and how those two can intertwine. Because when someone tells a story, it could be true or it could not be true. Or worst, it could have truth but be mixed with lies. And those are the most difficult things to parse out and figure out what's true and what's not. That'll be the cliffhanger for this video to go and dovetail into the next video. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next video.